back and hopefully not knock this over.
I have faith in you. All righty. Hello, Facebook. Thank you for watching Hudgens Talks. My name is Kate Driscoll. I'm the Public Programs Manager for the Hudgens Center for Art and Learning. And today I get to talk to Nate McCullough. Thank you so much for taking the time again.
Thanks for having me.
So will you tell people who are familiar with you what it is that you do?
Well, my day job is journalist. I'm the news editor for the Times in Gainesville, Georgia. I've been there about 5 years. Prior to that, I was at the Gwinnett Daily Post for 15 years. And there, my main job there was more in an editorial capacity as well, running the copy desk. But I was also a columnist for a very long time. And so probably anybody who is familiar with the Hudgens Center, that's probably how they would know me, is through, I had a weekly column for, I don't know, probably 10 years that seemed to be kind of popular with our readers. So that's probably anybody that would recognize me would know me from there.
What was your column about?
Anything I wanted it to be. They gave me a lot of leeway. And I never really got, they never really told me not to write about anything. They sort of let me run the gamut of, I've won awards from the Georgia Press Association, both for serious columns and for humor. And so I kind of mixed it up. Every now and then I'd write something really serious, and then I like to write, my hero was Louis Grizzard. And for people who don't know who he was a longtime columnist at the AJC. And he was sort of known for his down-home Southern humor and that kind of thing. So one of the biggest compliments anybody ever paid me was when a reader said, "You remind me of Louis Grizzard." And I actually got tears in my eyes because I thought, hey, I finally did what I set out to do when I was 12 years old. So.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge compliment. But yeah, you really kind of do it all. So you are a journalist, you're an author, you're a reviewer. What am I missing? I know I'm missing something.
Book editor. I make my living with words, and because I don't know how to do math. I barely remember my home phone number. So I've just been, I've always been drawn to reading, and I've always been drawn to the news. I have a picture somewhere of me sitting in a chair when I was about 3 years old reading a newspaper. I don't know if I was actually reading it or just looking at pictures, but I've always been drawn to the written word and telling stories. I think that's what I like the most of all. And writing fiction or writing a column or writing a sports story, doesn't matter what it is, it's still telling a story. That's if there's one thing I would really like to be referred to as, it'd be storyteller. That's what I like to do.
So, you said that there's a picture of you as a tiny kid reading a paper. Were you writing also when you were a kid at an early age, or did that come later?
I started in the 5th grade writing creatively, creating my own comic books. And I quickly realized I wasn't a very good artist either. I still like to draw sometimes, but I'm not very good at it. But I had, my grandmothers were both really good storytellers in different ways. My granny on my mother's side was sort of the family historian. She was really, really good at documenting things that happened in our family the way anybody else would document, U.S. history or world history. She documented our family's history. and was good at relaying those stories. My grandmother on my father's side was really good at telling creative stories, she was born in 1905. And so she was good at telling stories about the first time she ever saw a car, the first time she went to the county fair and they had a bear on display that they would get to climb a pole and then you had to pay money to get it to come back down and things like that. So I think the mix of those two things between the creative side from her and the documenting of things from my other grandmother kind of melded to me at a young age. And then when I was probably, I guess, in the 7th or 8th grade, I was reading Louis Grizzard's column in the newspaper by then. I read it regularly, and my mom took me to meet him at a book signing when I was 12, and he signed 2 books for me, and that was it. I was like, I want to be him one day, and I actually made it happen for a while. So I was never, he was much more popular. He was on television, and then he had comedy albums and things like that. I never quite made that level, but I did at least get to write a weekly column for a long time. So
can you tell people a little bit about what it is you like to write about in like your columns, or what is it you like to do in your working life?
Well, right now I've shifted over to a purely news side of it, and in that vein, I try to keep my opinions out of what I do. When you write a column, you're telling everybody what you think, and on the news side of it, you're telling people facts and letting them make up their own mind. And so I don't do a lot of writing right now for the newspaper unless it's just covering a news story. I actually did one the other day. There was this store in Gainesville called Pepper's Market, and it was hideous. It was pink and green. The owner had painted it that color on purpose to make people mad because he'd gotten in a tiff with the city council or whatever. And anyway, he was tearing it down. He's going to put up a restaurant. And so I happened to be in town that day, and I went and covered that. And I wrote a little story about tearing down the pink store. But
I know what you're talking about. I actually live in Gainesville, and I grew up in the area, so I know Pepper's Market is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so you understand that the tearing down of Peppers was a pretty popular story in that area.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, from the news journalist side of it, like I said, I'm more telling other reporters what to do, and I'm editing their stories and trying to make them better. For me personally, and I guess one of the reasons I was invited today is I'm another thing that I've always been interested in is creative writing, and that's the fiction side of it. Mm-hmm. And since I was a little kid, I've always been drawn to thrillers. Horror is my main thing. I love scary movies and monster movies and those kinds of things. Discovered Stephen King at a young age and those kinds of things. So earlier this year, before the plague hit, I decided to put out a book. And everybody always dreams of the giant book contract. One day you're going to submit the manuscript to the right agent and get the right deal. And the next thing you know, you're, a millionaire, famous author. And that just doesn't happen. I think winning the lottery might be even easier than doing that. But we live in a different world now where independent publishing and self-publishing and that kind of thing is not only easy to do, but it's accepted. There was a time when an independently published book would not get the time of day from any serious critics, from any publisher. It was looked down on, period. And Amazon and a couple of the other, outlets that have made it really simple for anybody to put out a book, they've created an environment where people can just do it on their own, and they can really bypass all of that if they want to. And again, you're never gonna, I won't say never, but you're not gonna Not going to become a millionaire doing it that way either. But if you work hard enough, there really is an opportunity to make something that way and win the same awards and, you know, sell a lot of books. And I know people who have done it. I know people who have switched from a day job to writing, and they do it all on their own. Now, they're rare and they work really, really hard at it. My day job has not allowed me to work as hard at it as I would like to. And then the pandemic came along and kind of blew everything up that I was starting to do at the beginning of this year. So, but I've done it once, and I'm going to do it again eventually. And I still would like to, in the genre that I write in, there are a ton of small presses of, you know, little independent sort of niche publishers. And I still want to get, I would love to sell a book to one of them one day, because they can spend more time marketing. And I've got a little slideshow. I can go over some of this real quickly if you want to. I can kind of explain it all. I'm going to share my screen.
Did you always know that if you wrote fiction, it would be horror?
Mostly. It's I like crime fiction. I like adventure thriller type fiction. Anything that's got some action. I'm not really a there we go. Hopefully that's showing up. I'm not really much into literary fiction and, you know, examining the deep, dark philosophies of romance and all that kind of stuff. But I like anything with a good story that's got me hanging on the edge of my seat. So let's see here if we can make this work.
Will you try sharing that just one more time?
Let me just start that part over. Maybe that'll work. All right, here we go.
Oh yeah, there we go.
All right, cool. All right. So, like I said, if you want to become an independent author, you can do it. And you can do it as fast as you want to write a book and publish it. All the tools are there online. You can do it and do it immediately, and you're totally independent. You're your own boss, your own editor, your own agent, your own publisher. And as long as you follow Amazon's rules, because honestly, Amazon, I mean, there are a couple of other places to go. There's Ingram Spark and a couple of other independent type outlets, but Amazon is the big dog. That's where you get the biggest audience. It's where you get the most money. It's where everybody goes. So as long as you follow their rules, you can pretty much do it. I mean, you can publish a book a week if you can write that fast. I don't know how good that'd be, but you get to be in charge of everything, and the money that you make after your expenses and Amazon takes their cut belongs to you. Now the cons, and if you blink, you'll miss this slide changing because it's exactly the same. Anyone can do it, which means people with no skill, people with no idea of how to tell a story, no idea of the editing process, they didn't pay attention in grammar, you know, those kinds of things. So there is a ton of competition. There are millions of books out there. They're not all done well, but some of them might be marketed well. Some of them, you know, there's some great stuff, and there's a lot of terrible stuff, and it's all floating in the same ocean. So to try to rise above it is your task. You need to have a little talent. You need to know the craft of writing. You need to have worked on that in advance. But just to know that you're not just competing against all the good writers, you're also competing against all the bad writers. So there's a lot out there. And again, you're totally independent. You're your own boss. So it's all on you. Everything that you have to do yourself. You have to figure out if you're going to edit your own book, or you're going to pay an editor, a professional editor, or you're going to pay, a cover artist, those kinds of things. You're going to do all the marketing, which I'm going to get to here in a second. And again, any money you make after expenses is yours, and your expenses will be a lot more than what you predict they will be early on. It will cost more money to do it properly. It will cost more money to put out a book independently than you think it will. So if you want to do it, first thing you have to do is write the book. That sounds easy to some people. Oh, I can sit down and do that in a month. Well, maybe you can. Some people can't. I have one manuscript that I've been working on for years. The one that I put out, I worked on off and on for probably a year, along with some short stories that go with it, which, by the way, we'll plug real quick. This is it. It's called Drag You Down, available on Amazon. But you have to have a product. The next thing you need to do is start networking. Even doing this on your own from your bedroom or your home office, you've got to know some people to help you out, because you're going to need to get editing done, or you're going to need beta readers, somebody who can read and give you feedback, you're going to want to try to get it to reviewers. There's a whole world that opens up by knowing people, and in any, doesn't matter if you want to be an accountant or a mechanic or whatever you want to be, you need to have a network of professionals and amateurs. You need people you can talk to, people you can bounce ideas off of. So you need to join a writing group or a critique group. Find all the right websites, find a Facebook group, those kinds of things. The third thing you have to do is make a plan. Again, you can sit down and write a manuscript, log on to Amazon, format it in an afternoon, pick one of their pre-made covers and have a book and be done. And it won't be very well done, and it'll be a mess. And, so if you want to do it right, you sit down and make a long list. And this list done right will be long. And I'll get into that here in a second too. And the last thing is marketing. And you see I wrote that 3 times, because you're going to spend 3 times the amount of money and time on that as you think you will. So let's go over each one of them real quickly. To write a book, you have to read. If you're not a reader, you don't have any business being a writer. There are other people that will dance around that a little more delicately than I will. But having been a professional editor for 20-something years, there are some people who don't have any business writing. I don't have any business performing brain surgery. And there are folks that they haven't done the work of reading and being a fan to sit down and write a book. So you have to read a lot, and especially in the genre. If you want to write spy thrillers, then you should have read at least 20 spy thrillers. You should have been a fan of it for a long time in your life.
Is that because you feel like there are certain tropes that if you're reading that maybe you become familiar with, or tools that are used in like a certain type of storytelling that you feel?
Yes. You can learn the techniques of what makes a good story, but you'll also learn what makes a bad story. Every book that you read is not going to be good just because somebody got it published. So if you learn, I had this idea, but I've read 4 other books that have the same idea, then maybe that's not the one. Maybe I need to go in a different direction. That's one of the things that you learn by reading. And then again, learning the art of writing. You can take classes. You can, there are creative writing classes. Like I said, join a writer's group, a critique group, anything like that. And then you have to write. I mean, it's like anything else. If you want to learn to play the guitar, you've got to practice. If you want to learn to fix cars, you've got to work on cars. Mm-hmm. You have to start out writing, and everything you write is not going to be good. And you got to realize that some of the things that you write you're going to look at them later and they're going to embarrass you. And that's why you don't show it all to the world. You'll kind of know when you finally have something that you think is worth showing to the world or showing to your critique group or whatever. So that's the first part of it. Again, with the networking, and I kind of went over this earlier, but getting to know other writers, editors, reviewers, anybody in the business. When the pandemic is over, conventions are a great way to do that, especially if you go to a writer's convention in a genre that you like. The horror community that I'm a part of has a lot of them, and they're the friendliest people. The first one that I went to, I was so intimidated because I was going to meet all these people whose books I'd been reading for a long time. And you kind of paint in your mind this picture of this exclusive club that they're, kind of going to look down at you a little bit. And it was totally the opposite. Every single one that I met was like, oh, you want to be in our club? Sure. We'll show you how. You have to work at it, but you can be in the club. They're incredibly nice people, most of them. So going to a publishing event, meeting an author at a meet and greet, as somebody who's sat behind a table to sign books, I like nothing better than somebody to come up and talk to me about my book. So, and if they want to talk about writing, even better. So, as it is here, get to know them, but don't be pushy. People also, especially in some of the smaller genres, they know everybody, and word gets around if you're not nice, if you're kind of pushy and kind of a jerk. So, and you can do the same thing on Twitter and Facebook, Goodreads. I think one of the things that I did right was I started to get to know a lot of people on social media a long time before I ever even thought about putting out a book, and engage with them. But you don't want to get a TPO against you. You don't want to. You don't want to be so pushy that they're tired of you. Just, get where they know your name so that 5 years later, they're like, oh, I know that guy. He put out a book. I'll retweet that. That's sort of the kind of give and take thing. The publishing plan, like I said, you're going to make a long list. I need to make a cover. I need to hire an editor. I need beta readers. I need a date when I want my book to go live. I need to figure out how I'm going to format it. I need to figure out if I'm going to go to a convention to promote it. Do I want to have a book launch party? The list is really endless of the things that you can do. Do I want to have a newsletter? All kinds of stuff. And so I strongly recommend people sit down and make a long list of what they want to do. What do you want out of publishing a book? And then what do you hope to get out of it? Well, the longer the list, the better. Same thing with the money. You could start a Kickstarter. I don't know how much success you'll have as an independent author. There's so many people trying to get money for movies and everything else. So I'm not sure that would work too well for the first-time author. But any money that you do spend is going to be out of your own pocket. So you need to figure out how much you can afford. And then we come to the big one. You're going to spend more time marketing the book than anything. It is the lament of every author that I know. Most of them hate it, but it is a necessary evil. You've got to do it if you want to get it in front of eyeballs. No one seems to know the true mystery behind the algorithm. We do know that reviews are very important, but beyond that, what's going to get a book to the top of a search list? Some people think they know, some people don't. I'm not sure anybody really does, but I can tell you, if you don't tell anybody that your book exists in the world, no one will ever know. So you're going to spend a lot of time on marketing, more money if you do it right. There are going to be little things here and there that are going to cost, $5 to buy this thing that you didn't know you were going to need to go to a convention or whatever. who's going to market you? You can hire people to do this for you. You're going to spend a lot more money to do that, to hire a professional, which is why most authors don't, because they don't have any money. So, and I put down, this is a, sort of my rule of thumb from my first book: whatever time you think you're going to need to do something, triple it. Everything that I've sat down to try to do that I thought would take an hour wound up taking 3 hours. So again, a lot of long range planning. What I think I did right was I started networking early. I started getting to know people in the genre so that I could ask questions, I could get advice, you know, I could get some help. I've had a couple of people who make their living at it give me a little boost here and there. It's been very valuable. I paid a professional cover artist. I can't stress enough that I put it this way: you can't judge a book by a cover, but you can sell a lot of books by the cover. An eye-catching cover is paramount. It is the first thing someone's going to see when they look the book up. It's the first thing they're going to see if they're staring at it on a bookshelf. It has got to make them pick it up. And if you are not a professional and know how to do that, you're probably going to fail. There are a million pre-made covers that are offered through the different platforms, but getting someone who is skilled at it, and I'm going to show mine off again because I'm so proud of it. It's done by a woman named Lynn Hanson, who I'm very proud to say is also a friend of mine. She made this for me. She did the back cover. She knows everything there is to know about how to format a book. She knows how to make a cover that will shrink down to a thumbnail, because that's the first time you're going to see it. It's going to be this tall. She knows this one was actually one of hers that was kind of pre-made, but she adjusted it for me when I asked for something. She did it on her vacation. That's why I'm very proud to be her friend, because that's the kind of person she is. But she's very well known in her genre. She only works in horror, so she's not making covers for, you know, literary fiction or romance novels or whatever. She only makes book covers for this. So I cannot stress enough, if you don't spend money on anything else, pay a professional cover artist. It will make a big difference in what you have for marketing material, and it'll make a big difference on people's first impression. The other thing that I did right was listening to those professionals. Her husband is an author named Jeff Strand, and he makes his living at it. He works really, really hard because he's told a lot of people he doesn't want to go back to a day job. So, but he's one of those guys of few words, but when he does speak, you should listen to what he has to say. And I have tried to do that. And a couple of others, professionals that I know that I try to take their advice when they offer it, because they've been there. And finally, and again, this kind of got blown up by the pandemic, because as a journalist, I've been so busy the past few months that it's hard to concentrate on anything else. But treat it like a part-time job, and you want it to be your full-time job. So don't just treat it as a hobby or something you do occasionally. You have to kind of treat it as something that you want to succeed at. What I did wrong is I didn't budget enough money. I didn't keep good enough track of my expenses, so I couldn't really tell you exactly how much money I spent on this book. I know it was more than what I've brought back in, but one of my big expenses was for an ad that I took out in a magazine that decided not to deliver at the beginning of the pandemic. So that was kind of, they wound up, they sent it to their subscribers through the mail, but it was supposed to go on Bookshelf. It's a worldwide magazine. It was supposed to be in every bookstore, and then the pandemic happened, and they said, yeah, we're not going to be delivering it this month. So that was disappointing. The other thing that I didn't do is get copies to reviewers. I I tried to put it out a little too quickly, and I should have sent review copies out because there are a ton of review sites, and they can make a big difference in, helping you market your book if they like your book. It's actually one of the things that I do for a website is review books, although that's kind of been on the back burner for a while for me too. But you got to get those copies out there for the people who will read them and give them stars. And that's what's important. I put listen to other professionals on the what I did wrong thing too, because occasionally you'll get advice from a professional that'll be outdated. I won't say it'll necessarily be wrong, but if occasionally you'll have somebody who's been doing it for 20 or 30 years and they will tell you something and it was true 30 years ago and it's not really true. You know what I mean? So occasionally you have to learn to weed out that kind of advice. And last but not least, I failed to predict a global pandemic that just destroyed every plan that I made on my big long list of publishing. All of it went out the window. So, but I didn't have a crystal ball. So, if anybody wants to buy Drag You Down by Nathan McCullough, here it is. It's on Amazon. Please, please, please leave a review. I don't even care if you hated it. Just leave a review. Those numbers are really important. The more reviews you get, the bigger the chance that people will discover it. And people have kind of learned they don't always pay attention to reviews, but if it has a lot of reviews, it's getting read. Mm-hmm. So there have been a lot of books and movies and things that have gotten 1-star reviews that I've loved. So I've kind of learned to take that with a grain of salt. But having 30 reviews versus having 300 reviews is a world of difference. So my website is nathanmccullough.com, and there's all my social media information there. And I believe that's it.
You feel like one of your points is like not you're saying don't show everything all the time that you're writing. You're saying some of it is going to be bad. Do you feel like how do you feel about things like blogs, or like do you feel like those are helpful for writers to be able to write in that way? Is that even that popular anymore? I feel like there was a real blog moment, but I'm not a writer, so I don't know.
The trend seems to be toward newsletters.
Oh.
I have a blog that has gone through various states of what it was going to be. Mm-hmm. I originally started out reviewing movies. I did this thing where I would talk about movies during the month of October, month of Halloween. I was trying to watch as many horror movies as I could. And because I've seen probably thousands of them, I have a bunch of useless knowledge about, and so I would write about them on Twitter, and I eventually started a blog. Then I decided I would make it into a horror news site, and quickly discovered that the world already had 3 or 4 of those that got millions of clicks, and they didn't need another one. So I really just sort of use it now to disseminate news about what I'm doing as a writer. Mm-hmm. And I will link to that in a newsletter. We use newsletters a lot at the newspaper, and our push to get digital subscribers. We do a lot of we send out a morning newsletter and an afternoon one, an entertainment one. And so I've been sort of slowly working into that. The first convention that I went to before the pandemic killed everything, I put out a sign-up sheet, and I got a bunch of email addresses. Somebody buy my book, they write down their email address, and so now they can get my newsletter. And newsletters, you can give people information in little tiny chunks, mm-hmm. and then you can link to the blog where they can, the internet's infinite. You can write as long as you want on there. People's attention spans are really short, so smaller chunks are usually better.
So you're talking about how you are an avid reader. Are there any horror books that you would recommend to people?
Oh, how long have you got? No. I would say, and I'll mention a handful of names, but before I do, I would say that the first thing I would recommend to people is branch out outside of the 4 or 5 that you see on every single shelf in America. We all love Stephen King.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Dean Koontz and Clive Barker and Anne Rice. And those books are everywhere and everybody's read them and they don't need any more money. And I don't have anything against them. I don't have some, oh, he's too successful or whatever. But there are a million small press, independent, self-published, even larger press writers who just don't get the recognition because they don't get the shelf space. Mm-hmm. And that's totally a marketing thing. If I'm Barnes and Noble, I'm going to put the things on the shelf that people are going to buy. But at the same time, it's why marketing is so important for most of us, because you're not going to get on their shelf. And the handful, they recently, speaking of Barnes and Noble, they recently revamped their horror section. They actually brought it back to life. Because horror has always been that double-edged sword. Everybody claims that they don't like it, but then The Walking Dead is the most popular show, or The Vampire Diaries, or True Blood, or Dexter, or the list goes on and on of the most popular movies and TV shows, and they all came from horror people. And so they recently brought that back to life, and I happened to go in the store right after they brought those shelves back, and 80% of them were Stephen King and Dean Koontz, the usual suspects. So that's my biggest message, is if you want to read those kinds of stories, there's a ton of really high quality fiction being written by people you probably never heard of. And you can find them just by getting to know some people on social media, or, just dig a little deeper than that first page of search results. As far as names of people who I recommend, John F.D. Taff, Taff. He was the first guy that I met, really, first professional writer that I met, who I've gotten to be friends with. And he's a really high quality, put you there. A writer has to put me there. They have to make me feel a connection, and he's really good at that. He's written several books that are highly recommended. He's been nominated for the Bram Stoker Award, which is sort of the horror community's Nobel Prize. Another writer that I like a lot. Women are doing a lot of the really good fiction right now. Karen Runge, I think is how you pronounce it. I've never been totally, if it's Runge or Runge, or it's Runge. She's a female writer out of South Africa who writes just brutally beautiful horror. It's really hard stuff to get through. Some of it is really tough subject matter, but it's brilliantly written. Kinsey Jennings is another one. She's written a book called Reception, and she just came out with another one called Red Station, which is a splatter western that is the main character is a female. So a woman named Clyde, which apparently was a thing in the 19th century, that there could be a woman named Clyde. That book was really well done. There's a woman named Sherry Sebastian Gabriel, who actually used to work at the Gwinnett Daily Post. She has a book called Spirits that is a kind of a quiet horror book about an alcoholic. It's a woman who suffers from alcoholism. That book's really well done. So there's a lot of stuff like that. And of course, if you want to go to the HWA Atlanta, that's the Horror Writers Association, the Atlanta chapter, if you go to that website, all of us are listed there. And all of our group, we do a lot. We have a really dynamic group too, because we have people who podcast, people who write. We have a guy who does a radio drama filmmakers, cover artists, editors, writers. So there's a lot out there, and you can find it. You just have to hit the old Google machine.
Oh, yeah, that sounds really awesome. Okay, thank you. The Horror Writers Association of Atlanta, is that what it was?
Yeah, the mother chapter is just called the HWA, the Horror Writers Association. That's a national, or I guess international, group specifically for horror writers. The one but the Atlanta chapter is actually, I think we rival LA and New York. I think we're like the third largest chapter in the country. I think third or fourth. We have a really big group. We're actually we're working on a sort of a secret project right now, trying to put together a group writing project. I don't know how much I'm allowed to say about it yet, but so I'm being a little vague, but we're trying to put together something we've all been working on for that we're going to try to use everybody's talents, the writers, the editors, the artists, that kind of thing. So yeah, we meet the second Saturday of every month, right now on Zoom, of course, but eventually in person again. And they're all good people too. They're fun to hang out with and talk about other stuff too. So
Nice. Well, that is all the time we have. Thank you everyone for watching, and thank you so much for taking the time and letting me pick your brain. And I feel like I've learned so much just in 40 minutes about writing I would not have even have considered.
Well, I'm glad I could help. This has been a big thrill for me, so I appreciate you having me.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.